What does it take to climb the ranks in trials? How do you go from being just a rookie to all the way to hotshot and beyond? What are the things that players in these top brackets are doing that the lower bracket players just aren't doing? This video is going to get into some of the greatest tips and tricks that I can give you for maximizing your potential within the trials universe. There is a lot more nuance to this ranked mode that I think most players are aware of. There's some unique and some sneaky aspects to how players are performing at the highest possible level. Let's start with the basics. Every week you will get 5 new challenges that you can play to stack up your score for that week. Some challenges are very open-ended, allowing you to rack up tons of points with no theoretical cap. And some challenges, like Hidden Bunker, have a hard ceiling of the total amount of points that you can earn. Knowing how to exercise each of these challenges in a way that allows you to maximize your score is the key to success. The first step in understanding how to maximize your score in any one of these categories is understanding how the trial score system works in general. When you come to the map page, all of your regular maps are going to be what's called a 1x event. A 1x event means you're going to get the full trials points for whatever trials challenge that you're doing. So if I were to go into Blue Gate and start to eliminate Hornets, I would get the maximum amount of points that are allowed for the Hornets. But what happens when you go into a night raid? What you'll see is up here in the upper right, a 2x shows up. And this 2x is an indicator that this event will give you 2 times the trials points that you would get in a normal raid. So what that means is the maximum amount of points that you would get on Blue Gate is doubled in a night raid. And all of the major events like the Electromagnetic Storm, Hidden Bunker, all of these events have the 2x multiplier, which allows you to stack up way more points when you play in these specific events. If you were around when Cold Snap was a thing, it was absolutely my favorite map to do trials on because you got the 2x score and you could also use Raider hatch keys. In night raids, in Electromagnetic Storms, and even in Hidden Bunker, you are not able to use a Raider hatch, which heightens the amount of tension that comes from needing to extract with other players. A key component to how the trial system works, you have to extract safely in order for your points to count. Otherwise, if you're eliminated or go down before you can extract, you will lose all of the points that you've made for that specific raid. Trials only keeps your personal best, which means if you've delivered 5 carryables in one night raid, allowing you to make this 5,000 points, you would have to go and do 6 in the next night raid in order to get 6,000. It doesn't accumulate. You can't just go into one map and say, I'm going to do 1 carryable and then I want my score to change. This is one of the biggest points of confusion that I see across all of the different content I create, is that players don't realize it's not an accumulation. It is just your personal best in one raid that you safely extract from. Now, how can we talk about ways for you to be successful? The first one is a little bit more nuanced, and it involves a little bit of probability in terms of how you matchmake. The biggest hurdle to trials is when you load into a game and you don't get a full match. If you don't have a full 30 minutes, it means you're automatically limited in the amount of points that you can earn, or a full 40 minutes for events like Hidden Bunker and the Lock Gate. So learning how to work the system to ensure that you're getting a full match is critical to your success within trials. The best and most certain way that you can ensure you are going to get a full match is to load into a raid at the top of the hour. So when this timer is at 59:59, that means you are able to get a full match 100% of the time. As this timer counts down and the raids that have been created at the top of the hour start to play out, those raids begin pulling in players to join in progress. So anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes after this timer hits 59:59, you are liable to join in progress. So if you want to ensure that you are getting a full 30 minutes, you need to join in at 59:59. Now, there's another aspect to this that you can game to your advantage, but it is a lot more of a gamble when you do it this way. Another component to consider when you're doing trials is that because players are going to join in progress, it means that your raid is going to be filled with the most amount of players possible up until there is 18 minutes remaining left in that raid. And then from that point on, there is no more join in progress, so there's no more players for you to be playing against that are joining in after the start of the match. So what you can do if you're willing to take that risk and gamble a little bit is you can wait until this timer gets down to the last couple of minutes left in the event. Once the timer is down to like 1 minute left, queue into a night raid, and if you get lucky and you get a full match, consider that once that 1 minute expires, this symbol goes away for all players that are currently trying to queue into matches, meaning you will not have any players joining in progress to that game. This can dramatically reduce the amount of players that you're playing against and allow you to stack up even more score because you're being challenged less for eliminating an enemy that is related to that specific challenge. It is a gamble, but it is great if you're able to pull it off, and it can really guarantee you a high score for that challenge. Now, understanding the nuance of how each of these maps work is what's going to take you to the next step. Another component to consider is that each of these events, either being a major or a minor event, will change the behavior of the map. If you were to go play Blue Gate and then you were to go play Blue Gate Night Raid, you would have a different set of enemies spawning in a different cadence across the map. And if you were to go into an electromagnetic storm, they would change again. And if you were to play like a Husk Battleground or a Husk Graveyard on Blue Gate, you would actually find an increase of hornets roaming around the map. There is nuance in each of these playlists that changes the way the map plays and then changes your ability to achieve score in that Trials challenge. Now, another aspect to consider is that certain events like an electromagnetic storm will cause differences on the map in terms of what is available to be looted. A good example is that during an electromagnetic storm, arc probes are found in a lot more volume, crashed around the map with smoke plumes coming up from them. This means if you want to score high in something like open arc probes, you have to do it during an electromagnetic storm because the volume of probes for you to breach and clear is much higher during that event. So, learning the different nuances of how these maps play is going to take you from that rookie step to that wild card step and into that daredevil step. And the more that you understand the nuances of how these different maps work and how the different major events change how the maps work, it will greatly improve your ability to climb ranks. Now, something that I've learned more so recently that I didn't know was happening is that they're also changing how the map functions over time. For a long period of time, Hidden Bunker was not a great place to go to farm the large-scale enemies like Bastion and Bombardiers. There are Bastions and Bombardiers that protect the bunker, but in earlier iterations of Hidden Bunker, the respawns for those enemies was incredibly low. Lately, at least within this past week, Hidden Bunker is respawning those enemies at lightning speed, allowing some players to amass insane scores by farming the Bastions and Bombardiers as they load back in to the Hidden Bunker map. So not only do you need to understand the nuance of how each of these 2x major events work, you also need to understand the nuance of the dynamic nature of how Embark is tweaking these maps to feel different over a period of time. And that's something that you can't learn from reading the description or any other way than simply playing the map enough times and seeing it change and evolve over time. Now, as it comes down to the find and search components of the game, there are a lot of trials challenges that will be go find a thing and deliver a thing, or go search a thing and get components from it in order to stack up your score. In these cases, the areas in which these things are spawned in are fairly static, but they can be randomly placed within a gigantic set of static spawns. There are a lot of online interactive maps that will allow you to drill down into just looking for all of the different marked locations that raiders have said they've found a probe. And you can essentially use that interactive map to design a route for you to follow when you're in game that will allow you to maximize your points in this challenge. I can guarantee you, players who are getting high scores in open arc probes, in deliver carryables, are using those interactive maps and are essentially creating a perfect route that they can take in order to achieve high score. To take this even further, you have to understand another component. Something like open arc probes requires you to breach the arc probe itself and then to search the container in order to get the points for the trials challenge. Since the amount of time that it takes to breach will change based on whether or not you have the proficient prior stat, the amount of time that it takes for you to actually search a container can vary greatly. Players who do have this perk unlocked will be able to breach the fastest, but it still means that you will breach and search a container after a period of time. So players who are the ones doing the actual breaching and searching of the containers versus players who just come by an open container after the fact and are able to just search it and move on to the next one, will have a distinct advantage over other players. So some players who are able to get astronomical points here are also very good at understanding how to follow other players and let them do the breaching itself. Taking this even a step further, you need to understand that there are some challenges like damage hornets and damage ground-based arc enemies that are going to be relative to the amount of damage that you apply to that enemy. The trial score that you receive will directly correlate to how much damage you've applied to that enemy. Every enemy in the game will have a trials points cap, in which is the most amount of points that you can earn for eliminating that enemy if you are the sole damager of it till it's eliminated. So you can essentially do all the damage to a hornet to earn 380 points, or if you share that damage with somebody else that's not in your squad, you essentially lose out on trial score based on the damage that they apply to that enemy. So understanding which challenges are related to that and how much damage you need to do to achieve full score is super important. Now, beyond the luck components that I've already highlighted, you have to understand there is another component to this that also matters. A lot of these challenges come down to whether or not you have a blueprint that will enable you to be more successful than other players. As an example, by having the Wolfpack blueprint, I am capable of doing the Damage Rocketeers challenge much more effectively than a player that does not have this blueprint. So by nature of the blueprints that I have acquired, I have an advantage over players that don't have this. And in some cases, with the Trailblazer, with the Wolfpack, with the Deadline, the difference in total amount of points that you can earn by being able to craft these and be able to carry them in bulk is tens of thousands of points different between players. Players that don't have these blueprints that allow them to maximize their score in the challenge are held to just a few things that they're able to buy from somebody like Apollo, where you can buy some Trailblazers, you can buy a Deadline per day, or even going to TN, being able to buy a Hull Cracker if you haven't completed a quest line yet, which will allow you to get the blueprint and the ability to craft it yourself. You will be limited to your ability to earn points and stack up score based on the blueprints you have. So you need to make sure that when you are playing trials and you are trying to go up the ranks, that you're also spending time going around different maps and looting until you find the blueprints that you need to be successful. And if you're not able to find those blueprints to be successful, know that there are always additional ways to go about doing them, but they might not be as effective as what the blueprints give you. Another aspect to consider about the amount of total points that you can earn, keep in mind that right now in trials, a solo player is going up against 3-stack players, which has an inherent disadvantage in comparison to what the volume is that a 3-stack team can earn. A 3-stack team can position themselves in 3 different places for the Damage Hornets trial and farm 3 different Hornet locations all at the same time, sharing all of the score that each of those players earn together. Whereas a solo player like myself can only go to one location and farm from there, and can only earn the total points that I can earn playing by myself. Now we need to talk about RNG versus perceptional RNG. What is really RNG versus what it seems to be RNG to the player. As an example, if I'm doing the Gather Plants challenge and I go to a place where I know that I can find a certain amount of plants, and this time I only find half of those plants, is that an RNG based spawn mechanic that caused less plants to be spawned? Or has a raider came by and picked a few of the plants, making there be a less total amount of plants that can be farmed? This is a perceptual component to RNG. It is very hard for me to know, especially in a challenge like Gather Plants, whether or not the map is spawning a different volume of plants each time I spawn in, or if some players are just going by a group of plants and only picking a few, making it seem like there's less to be gathered. Since I can't know as a matter of fact as to whether or not this is truly a map mechanic or just a perception that I have based on playing the map multiple times, this is something that we call perceptional RNG, or the idea that something is RNG related, but we cannot confirm as a fact that it is. You can compare that to a true RNG component like spawns on the bigger enemies. As an example, for this last week, doing the damage ground-based arc enemies, I know as a fact that on Spaceport during a night raid and electromagnetic storm, there are 2 bastions and 2 bombardiers that are spawned in different locations on the map. Each time that I spawned in to go do that challenge, 1 or more of those enemies were not spawned in, which reduced the amount of points that I could earn for eliminating those enemies. Even tougher is that I would eliminate one of the large enemies and use materials that I had spent hours farming up to get that elimination, only to find out that the next enemy I was rotating to just simply didn't spawn in. In this case, it was truly an RNG factor, and I can't say what caused the enemies to not spawn in for me in the multiple rounds that I tried before I got to the round where all of the enemies spawned in. This seems like it could be an RNG component to the game, where some maps just won't spawn a stronger volume of enemies, but again, I can't say for sure, but it did dramatically affect my ability to earn score and stack up points. So keep that in mind as you are doing trials. There is a bit of luck that's involved in getting high scores. Now the last component here is understanding the difference between a PvE and a PvP lobby. This game uses a system called aggression-based matchmaking, which is essentially a behavior watching system that will match you with players based on the type of way that you play the game. What this means is if you're running around and you're eliminating raiders and you're knocking them out, you will get placed into games where raiders are more often doing that as well. This allows PvP players to play with other PvP players and PvE players to play more with PvE players. But just because you're in one of those two specific categories doesn't mean that you can't make the journey between the two. If you are in PvP lobbies and you want to do trials and not be shot in your back every time you're shooting a hornet, you can allow yourself to get to a PvE lobby, but it requires you to go into raids, not shoot other players, just extract safely. Or I've heard some players who say that you can simply just go in free kits and surrender repeatedly, and after about 10 or so raids doing that, you will be placed into a PvE lobby. I haven't tried that method myself, but I can confirm that if you are in PvP lobbies and you choose to not engage in PvP in lobbies after that, you will eventually get sorted back down into PvE lobbies, and trials becomes a significantly easier problem to deal with when you're only dealing with the arc itself. Looking to the future or where trials goes, I genuinely hope that they can separate the leaderboards between solos, duos, and trios. It just makes sense to have those brackets split up and allow the players that are playing in a certain type of way to be placed up against other players playing that same way. It is an easy change overall, especially with the player population this game has, but I understand that even if it's easy in terms of the idea behind the design, the engineering needed to make that separation, to create the 3 separate brackets, to be able to sort all the players into different unique spaces, it takes time, and I am confident that with time, Embark will make this change, but it might be a road before we're able to get to that point. Something else I would like to have added for trials specifically is a trackable amount of score within the HUD as you're eliminating enemies. Right now, all you see is the amount of experience that you earn for taking those enemies out, and you don't know exactly how much trial score you're getting unless you open up your logbook and you check in between each elimination. While the logbook is great and it's super helpful for being able to do that, it would just be a lot more fluid to understand in real time how much your trial score is being affected by the enemies that you're eliminating or the things that you're searching. Overall, I'm really happy with this ranked component of the game itself. It actually stays away from the more heavy player versus player component, which would draw in a completely different audience for the game and for this game mode. Beyond all of that, the nuance is even harder to get into in a single video, but I hope these high-level tips and tricks and these explanations will help you take your trials to the next level and get you up to the next rank that you're looking to get up to. That's going to be it for me today, y'all. Thanks for watching.